Welcome everyone to this very special program that we're doing this afternoon with Pleasantville Garden Club. My name is Jane Dunn, and with Susanna, we chair the program committee for the club. Today we have a very special speaker who will speak to us about making and maintaining nature-based gardens. After the presentation, we'll have time for Q&A, and I will be walking around, as well as Carolyn will be walking around with the mic. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll come to you with the mic. This program will be, as you can see, we're filming it. So once the program starts, please, actually right now, please take out your cell phones. Either turn the cell phones off or turn them on silent. It's very important that we don't have any interruptions. This video will be on PCTV, which is Pleasantville's TV station. Shane McGaffney is here. He's the station manager, and he does an excellent job of doing this, so we really appreciate him coming out and taking care of all of our technology for this. And I encourage every one of you who hasn't already done this to go to PCTV, go to Pleasantville Garden Club. We have a lot of videos similar to what you've seen right now on the screen. There's a lot of information out there that you can view. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susanna, who will introduce our speaker.
Hello, thank you. Edwina Von Gal is a landscape designer with many years of experience. She's had her design company since 1984, and she specializes in creating landscapes with a focus on simplicity and sustainability, both for private and public clients around the world. She has done collaborations with very famous architects like Maya Lin, Frank Gehry, Annabelle Seldorf, and Toshiko Mori, and she's worked on projects with well-known people such as Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, Richard Serra, Larry Gagosian, Robert De Niro, and Jan Venner, as well as many other people in the environmental, design, and art communities. And she is a writer. She has a book called Fresh Cuts, which won the award for garden writing in 1998. More recently, in 2013, she created a project called Perfect Earth. It's a nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to raising consciousness about the dangers of toxic lawn chemicals and the importance of planting native plants to protect both the health of people, their pets, and the planet. In 2021, she launched another initiative, this one called 2/3 for the Bird, about the awareness of planting natives. So when you go to a nursery, out of the plants that you buy, make 2/3 of them native in order to support the local bird populations. And she's currently working at her own property called Marsh House, making it into a laboratory and a teaching center for whole and healthy landscape practices. Edwina is also the recipient of multiple awards for her work. The Institute of Classical Architecture and Art gave her an award. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award for the visual arts from the Guildhall's Academy of the Arts, and a Green Design Award from the New York School of Interior Design. So I'm honored to be able to bring you Edwina Von Gal today. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Jane and Susanna. Thank you, Senta. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's wonderful to see such a large crowd. As you can imagine, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I've spoken to some really empty rooms. So it's quite fantastic to now start, like, people want to hear this, so here we go. So this is my porch. I am lucky enough to live in a very tiny house in a very big space, a salt marsh outside of East Hampton, and it's where my inspiration comes. One of the good parts about it is I'm not allowed to touch it, so I can sit there and just relax and not think about all the things I should be doing. And in my view is an osprey nest. And each year I watch them come and hatch their young. And so much of that I owe to, as we all do, to Rachel Carson, and the fact that she, with her book Silent Spring, had DDT banned, and we thought, done. Like, we thought we had it made. But unfortunately, the response has been actually for like more targeted new chemicals to come around that are, in a way, a little bit more dangerous because they are under the guise of being harmless to humans and to non-target organisms, which kind of is proving to be not true. So one of the things that came to my notice, particularly, and a lot of other people too, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, this report came out about the bird decline, that we have lost a third of our birds, which is close to 3 billion of the total bird population in North America. And it's continuing down. And it's our common backyard birds that are actually affected the most, not, as you would think, the more rare and endangered ones, because the rare ones live in hard-to-go places where people aren't gardening and not removing their habitat. Those are the habitats that are protected. The habitats that are not protected are our backyards. And the reason for the bird decline is primarily loss of habitat, use of pesticides. So when I was reading about that, it was like, oh, that's me. That's what I talk about. I've got to do something. So I started incorporating this into my messaging because, in a way, people are, as much as we all love plants, I know that like birds and animals are a more effective communications tool than a plant. So I have to accept that. So, and birds are a key indicator species for the health of any environment. So you can see right away by looking at your bird populations whether or not your landscape is actually providing everything it needs and is earth positive. So take a look at this landscape and I would say, well, you would say probably not great habitat in spite of the bird feeder, but bird feeders are nice for people. They bring birds close to you. You can learn how to identify them and everything, but they don't make a difference in bolstering or increasing or supporting bird populations. So then you look at this place and you say, well, that's a charming little landscape. This one offers possibly less for birds than the one in the previous photo. Take a look. Sterile flowers, no pollen, no nectar for pollinators, nothing there. Boxwood, probably the non-native one, so nothing there. It's there because nothing will eat it, which is always a indicator of what's available. Grass that's suspiciously monocultural and green. So basically any bird is going to keep flying by. They're not going to stop at this place. So what do we do? And why are we making our landscapes like this? Because to me, it's always really interesting, before you're asking people to do something different, try to understand why they're doing it the way they're doing it now. Because that's the key to how to change behavior. And part of it is like tidiness. People are making their landscapes too tidy. So the tidiness is what I call the dead room, because everybody wants their landscape to look like their living room, but it's outdoors. Of course, you don't want ants and leaves and plant material in your living room, but you do need them outdoors. But the problem is that most people have no criteria other than gardeners, but everybody else out there doesn't really know what they're looking at. So the only instructions they can give to their gardener is clean and straight lines, and they know they've done their job. So this is like the outdoor living room. There's not, leaves would look really out of place in that picture. That garden has not been designed to gracefully incorporate the cycles of nature. So and the other thing is that it's a business model. So not only the homeowners are making decisions that are not friendly for the earth, they're being supported by the landscape industry, which has developed a business model that makes it very simple for that kind of service to be applied to your yard. You don't have to know a thing about plants. To get in most towns, I don't know of any that are other, let me know if there are, because we need to give them an award, that to get a license to landscape, most people don't even ask if their landscaper has a license, but they're supposed to. And the criteria is machine handling safety, pesticide applicator license. That's it. Nobody ever asks, what do you know about plants? Do you know how to plant a tree? Do you know what a monocot is versus a dicot? Do you know any of these things that make a plant what it is, what it likes, how it survives? When does a plant need more water versus less? Most people's automatic responses give it more. Most plants kind of die from overwatering more than less, more than too little. So here's a sweet little landscape. And this landscape is totally designed for dependency. There is no way this landscape could live a year looking like this without a constant input of what I call noise and poison. It's, you can't let those trees get 1 inch bigger or the plants beneath are going to be shaded out. None of this can change. It is frozen. And I made this presentation to the garden club in St. Louis. And afterwards they said, "Oh, our gardens are in Spanx." And thought, you got it. So this is your standard landscaper truck. This is all about basically suppressing and killing life. There's nothing there, to actually be nice to life forms. And this is what happens. Everything that a property produces, starting with grass clippings, is treated as garbage. It is so not garbage. It's the food a landscape made for itself. And and once it gets to the dump, it turns to methane, so there's a lot of issues. So here is your standard fall scene, the leaves being blown off of the soil being exposed to freeze-thaw, sun, all winter long, so the organisms anywhere near the surface are basically dying. A drip tube on bayberry, which is a native plant that doesn't like being all that wet. So those drip tubes probably have been left there running for who knows how many years. So the bayberries, people say, well, now my bayberries are starting to get some kind of a disease. And I said, well, just get rid of the irrigation. That's the first thing you got to do. So, and then there's also this complete incomprehensibility of the tree volcanoes, which you could also call the toilet plunger look. And why? So that was another thing, why? Why are you doing this? So I finally got to the root of it, so to speak. That landscapers say, well, my clients like the look of mulch, and so we put X amount of mulch into their contract each year. So let's say we show up at their house with 3 yards of mulch, but we only have enough garden space for 2.5. So what do we do with that extra half of yard of mulch? They paid for it. We're giving it to them. We're not driving it back to the shop. So we put it around the trees. And each year we put more around the trees. These trees are destined for probably not long future because they're putting out adventitious roots into that. That's where they breathe. Trees, think of them as my people. Trees breathe through their roots. Everybody thinks that's all happening in the leaves. No, the soil, that's where it's happening. And the soil, the oxygen levels in the soil are critical to the health of a tree. And part of that is because it's critical to the soil biome, which is what helps the tree's roots exchange their nutrients and photosynthetic systems. And then this is let's add insult to injury. Why not? Because, or maybe they heard me whining about the volcanoes and thought, well, maybe this will make her happy. and then we'd send a crew out each year to cut off maybe a third of the leaf surface of trees, because they've been decided that, well, I can recognize a tree if it's in a geometric shape. Maybe I'll feel more comfortable, more in control of my yard. It won't scare me so much. If that's a globe, that's a pyramid, and that's a square. And so it's fine to hire, according to this economic model for the landscape industry, is fine to go in, but we're going to chop this, we're going to chop that, we're going to chop everything. Well, keep in the back of your mind, every cut is a wound, but ouch. But what about if a caterpillar, who isn't actually even diving into the woody stems of your plant, what if a caterpillar just nibbles on a leaf? What do people do? They get this. They get spray. because, but you weren't going to eat that leaf. No, you were going to send it to the dump as if it was garbage. But at the same time, it's worth a lot to the landscape industry for you to hire someone to come and spray the tree. But without those caterpillars, we can't have chickadees, because that's what chickadees feed to their young. And probably most of you have read or heard Doug Tallamy on the subject. Chickadees need about 6,000 caterpillars to raise a single nest of young. They can't travel more than about a quarter of a mile, or they would wear themselves out in the collecting process. And a healthy population of chickadees is maintained by 2 to 3 nests of young a year. Do the math, a whole lot of caterpillars. Does your garden have that? So what we're talking about is, here's, this like ideal that's being put out there for us, that's based not on what is really, truly beautiful or perfect in my sense, or it's certainly not what's good for the earth. It's good for business. So I'm asking everybody to think again about what a landscape should look like and what your relationship to your land can be. So the Perfect Earth Project is, as mentioned, the nonprofit I started, and then I started 2/3 for the Birds in order to help enhance the message and give people an opportunity to engage on a very specific level, using Doug Tallamy's research that 70% of a landscape needs to be native in order to be a functioning ecosystem. So, but 70% is just a number, and 2/3 rhymes with birds. So I fudged it a bit, and that's what it is. And so all that it asks of everyone is to plant going forward. Don't look back. Just going forward, that 2 out of every plant you put on your property is native. It's not a lot to ask. There's 1/3 of your plants as exotics, as long as they're not invasives. It's a lot. You can still have a lot of what your garden may already meet that criteria, but it's worth thinking about. And so these are the things. And then when you do that, then you're like through the what I call like the garden gateway drug. So you're on to like all the other things that you can possibly do that just continue to enhance your biodiversity and the incredible life that a property could have when it's just buzzing with butterflies and bees. And so planting natives, number one. Since I'm talking to a garden club, I put some plants in here. So this was done by one of my, I guess you could say, my proteges. She worked in my office for many years and is a really good designer, Abby Lawless. And she's been converting people's front yards, backyards, side yards, everywhere. And this is a project we did together in Southampton. I don't know if can you see all those butterflies? She sent me this, she texted me one day and she said, I'm here on Meadow Lane. The place is like, it's swarms of monarchs. And the garden had only been in for about, I think that was his 2nd summer. It was very, very rewarding. And so my favorites, I'm trying to tell from the monitor what I'm looking at. I think that's elderberry, right? So I always try, and this is Toshiano, who's my right hand at Perfect Earth Project. And as my brain fails, he remembers the plant name. So I'm going to go real fast through all these slides to give us plenty of time for questions at the end, and Toshi will be able to help me answer them. So elderberry, Sambucus canadensis, one of the all-time greats. It's also viewed as such by deer. So one of the things that I have found is that, like last year 2 years ago, I fenced in about half of my property, and it's been a whole new world because before that I just couldn't grow things that really produce a lot of flowers or fruit. But one of the things with deer fencing is a good idea to make sure that there are openings in the fence that all other wildlife can pass through. So if any of you is interested in how that looks, we can talk about that later. Aruncus, fabulous plant for shade. These are plants that you get them established. They do not need watering. They do not need fertilizing. They do not need pesticides. They are fine. They did fine for millennia before humans came along. And as long as you put them in the right place, they will be fine. And this is a really great one, Calicarpa. There's a Japanese version. Stay away from that. It'll seed all over your yard. And the Native American one is equally, if not more beautiful. I'm not even sure why they brought in the Japanese one, because I think the American one is the color of the berries is just that much better. And this is Itea virginica. Now, I just got a card in the mail the other day from Proven Winners. I bet you all get them too. So they've got a new Itea, and it's like a little mound, a little button of a thing. And that's their Proven Winner. So I had been speaking to a horticulturist at one point, and she's been working in the nursery trade for a long time. And I was like whining about, why do all these new plants, like, why are they just like little frozen bumps? And they don't play well with the others, you know, everything's like a bump, a bump, a bump. I can't, like, they don't mix together. Is this really what the gardening public wants? And she said, oh, no, not at all. It's what the retailers want. They don't tip over, and they can stack them. It's called, what was it? You know, stack them high, sell them low or something. So that, you know, because you can fit a lot more of them in the shipping container if it's a low, short, compact plant. So the costs for producing that plant, the ease of putting it out there is considerably reduced, but it's not really serving the gardener at all. So keep your eye out. You know, if you want a little button of a plant, fine, but I like plants that I don't prune, that are allowed, give them the room they want and let them go and be beautiful, get them out of the spanks. And so this is, I'm also looking at, in spite of native, you know, there's kind of a question about how do you define native, right? Is native your very own ecoregion right here? Or is it whatever, like all of North America? Or what is it? And that's really your choice. Because if the plants will thrive, to my mind, if you're not doing a restoration, if your job as a landscape designer or landscape architect is to do a restoration, so you're creating an ecosystem that is supposed to be true to a particular place, then you really have to be true to that particular place, and that's the plant you choose. But in your own garden, I'm experimenting with assisted migration. So we know it's getting warmer. So I'm looking to places farther south for ideas for plants. So let's say as insects are driven up, as the south might get too hot for them, and the birds and the insects all are moving north, how about if I have some plants there they recognize when they arrive? How about I'm providing an extended, so it's also fun as a gardener, of course, to expand my palette. So this is a plant called Alyssium floridanum. It has a lot of selections, and I think, though, that this one is the straight species. Does it look like it, Toshi? Maybe the flower's a little large, I don't know. But, I mean, they get pretty wild, the manipulations, but I try to stay as close as possible to the true species, because that's what the insects evolved with. But the deer don't eat it, which is a tremendous benefit. I'm not sure how well it'll do up here, but I have it in a protected corner, so it does not like wind. It doesn't like harsh sun or wind, but it's evergreen, and it's just a really great little plant. And so the other thing is invasives. Like, there are now invasives. Things have a way of becoming invasive, something we didn't know about in the past, that a plant can behave extremely well in your garden, and it's generally like in the 15 to 20 year mark where that plant starts to jump into the wild. So we all know that barberry is a giant problem because it's been in the wild now for quite a few years, and we see it in the woods and taking over there. But we may not be aware of the fact that Buddleia is doing the same. I just read that they've banned calorie pears in, where? Illinois or somewhere? Ohio, thank you. Yeah, so, you know, innocently, but if you've ever taken the train to Princeton, train tracks are the most amazing dispersal agents. Like, so from the Hamptons to New York, dispersal for Buddleia. All along the sides of people go, oh, that's so pretty. But maybe nothing else would grow there. So I'm of two minds about the invasives that will grow where absolutely nothing else grows. Their nectar is not ideal for butterflies. but it's not bad for them either. It's just somewhat limited in its range. And so here it is escaping in the wild in a river bank. Another one of my pet peeves is miscanthus, the sinensis gracilis, escaping like crazy on the South Fork of Long Island. And this is a meadow right next to my house where it's taken over. I think they do this just to bug me. This is a county open space. So when they come to mow each year, they mow around the miscanthus. They mow the native grasses down. And so I call up the town and say, what? Could they come back? And they say, oh, we don't know who does that. So it's anyway, so one of these, I think I'm going to just get out there myself pretty soon. So, and then so people say, one thing to know, the word pesticide is actually a general term. It means things that kill pests. So a pesticide is not just an insecticide, it's a herbicide, it's a fungicide, it's a rodenticide, it's a bactericide. So those are all pests. So that's what pesticides kill. So if somebody says pesticide, it doesn't strictly refer to killing insects. And as we know, pesticides at one time have gone through all these evolutions. So there was a moment when everybody figured DDT was just like modern magic. And now we know it's not. And then after the Second World War, we had atrazine and 2,4-D that are broadleaf killers. Now we know that they do kind of wreak havoc on your endocrine system. They cause, and then the wonder of wonders, we got glyphosate, better known as Roundup. When I was starting out in the nursery trade, these were fantastic. The salesman told us we could drink it. We didn't, but we didn't worry about getting it all over our hands, all over our clothing, using it because it was magic, and we could just take care of weeds just like that. And we believed it was safe. But what we didn't understand then is what these pesticides kill. Yes, they're targeted. They're not targeted for human cells. Only 1/10 of your body is human cells. The rest is your biomes. Your biomes consist of, guess what? All those things that are considered pests that pesticides attack. So your capacity for your body to operate, which depends entirely on your biomes, is severely limited or impacted by the presence of pesticides. More and more research is coming out. This is a really exciting time in spite of the concerns we have about our future. There's also so much amazing science that's happening that we're starting to combine with ancient indigenous wisdom in a super exciting fashion, bringing the old and the new together. So experiential knowledge mixed with laboratory and scientific knowledge. We now know, because before that we just thought this stuff is bad, it doesn't feel right. Now we know why. And so, this is like pesticides at work. You needed to do that? It's like Roundup at work. How good could that be for a tree? A tree that also relies on its soil biome. So the other thing is, besides, one of the things that the amazing Rebecca McMacken, who was head of the Brooklyn Bridge Park, she developed a technique for training in the park that if you can't name it, don't kill it. Wait until you know what it is, because they were creating a space that was pesticide-free and also native plant-based. So they're trying to create an incredibly welcoming space for native plants. The idea would be that maybe some native plants would occur spontaneously. Maybe they would appear. Maybe there's latent seed in the soil. Maybe a bird brings it in. But if it wasn't on your plant list, do you just rip it out because you think it's a weed? So she felt strongly that her staff not only would benefit from really understanding how you look at and name a plant, but they have now the pride of knowing that they've discovered 2 species because they were plants they didn't recognize. So this is a carex. Carexes kind of all look the same. And yet they did not rip out that carex. And it turns out it's a plant that hasn't been seen in New York City for over 100 years. And that built so much pride among her staff. And then there was another one, I think it's a type of aster. So try it in your yard, I catch myself. The other thing is with bugs, like everybody probably knows what this caterpillar is, right? So the swallowtail. But do you know what this is? Would you be tempted to kill it if you saw it crawling towards you? It's the larval form of a ladybug. And larval forms tend to be voracious because they're like teenagers. So they do a tremendous amount to control aphid populations. And one of the things that sort of using logic, which is always kind of after the fact in my life, but realizing that, the good predators are not sitting around your landscape waiting for their prey to appear, right? So your landscape is all nice. You have no aphids. You're totally happy. Well, the ladybugs who would live on those aphids can't be there because there's no food for them. So then let's say a few aphids appear on your whatever, and you freak out. Where are the ladybugs? Well, you have to have enough of them before the ladybugs feel like, well, this is an adequate new home for me. Like, I can't dine out on one aphid. You have to have an aphid population. So you just got to sort of sit and wait. Just wait, and they'll come. And if they don't, maybe you're willing to give up some of that plant. Now, there's a big difference between the plants that you grew to eat yourself. I don't challenge that. You do not want insects coming in and eating your prized tomato crop or something. And that I leave to the plant, to the human food people, the vegetable gardens. I'm talking about food for all the other life forms. And if you're not going to eat it, why can't they? Because that is the food web. That's the food web in action. So you've got to recognize that when you see some nibbling, like nowadays they're like really great. People get milkweed plants. When they see them being eaten, they say, oh, fantastic. The monarchs are going to come. I know there was a monarch because nothing else eats them. But you know for sure that this is a positive relationship. Can you extend that kind of thinking to all the plants in your garden? So also, it means thinking about how you've built your garden and what you see as beautiful. Because what I'm asking people to do is to bring a new aesthetic to their garden, the look of their gardens, and let nature play a significant role in the design process. So I've already mentioned, like, maybe stop pruning things so much, and so we have some really great predecessors now, some examples, and this is the High Line, that have given people a taste of what this can look like, which is really fabulous because it makes my life a whole lot easier to say to people, go there, see it at its best, and then try it at home. Because you can see how absolutely fabulous this kind of gardening can be. And this is Brooklyn Bridge Park. You can just make out Brooklyn Bridge in the background there. But who would guess that this is Brooklyn, a park in a densely populated area, and that what previously would have been considered a place that they forgot to take care of is now prized as a place where butterflies and pollinators can thrive. And this is my all-time, and we have the gardener here today, Emily's here. This is my all-time favorite example of fully integrated architecture and landscape. It's Manitoga and Russell Wright's home. If you have never been there, I totally encourage you to go. It is extraordinarily beautiful. And to me, it's just like, it's the ideal. And this is a friend's house. Like, she used to have a very formal garden out front. Every year she'd replant it with just the right annuals that did the right thing. And finally we said, let's go for it. Let's make a meadow. So we did. And everybody stops along the road to take a picture of this house with this meadow out front. And each year we're learning, it gets better. And this is, I forget the name of this, is a public garden, but you don't have to have massive mixtures. You can still do monocultures, even though they're less appropriate in the biodiverse garden, because you do want to have, you need enough of one plant together, just like if you're looking, you need enough of prey insects before you get your predators. Well, you need enough attractant flowers before you get your pollinators. So they need to be able to see them and come and have a meal there. This is Pachyra, which is a really great plant for early in the spring. It's pretty aggressive. So if you don't want to weed, because one of the things I strongly promote is using plants instead of mulch. Fill every space with plants. And if you can't buy enough plants to do the full space, then just plant what you can, fill it up, and then use those plants. You can divide them, take seed from them, and do the next section. But you'll reduce your weeding, and you'll increase the happiness of your plants. Plants are social. They don't want to be one here, one there, with a giant mass of mulch around. It will take them forever to fill in. Mulch is a growth inhibitor. Think about it. Doesn't work. They won't fill in. They can't seed. They can't drop stolons, because the mulch is there to stop them from doing that. So fill it up. If the other way that everybody's looking at now, and there's so much more available, is to use annuals. I use some non-native annuals, but there are also now more and more annual seed that's coming available. So you can seed it like now, and all the bare patches, they fill in. And they'll be there for the second year less so, and the third year less so, as your perennial crops fill in. So it's a really nice way to get a lot of pollinator POW without a lot of money. The other thing that's starting to catch on a lot, and I've just gotten a couple of emails in the last few days about winter sowing of perennials. So you sow now, you don't have to scarify them. Just sow them outdoors. The cold will prepare them, but do them in little pots. You can do them in cow pots or something, or even in flats. Don't do them in the ground, in the perennials, because you won't get nearly the same results. But there's some, I think it's the Wild Seed Project in Maine. They have really great information and great seeds. So how do you do the reverse? How do you design a garden and build your garden for independence rather than being dependent on you? Because how about if you made your garden so that you're not sitting there thinking, I've got to mow, I've got to edge, I've got to prune, I've got to do this. What if you spend the time saying, I got to go out and count how many butterflies there are? How many different species did I get? Let's fire up the Merlin. And about Merlin? Anybody who doesn't know about Merlin, just download that app, and you can identify birds by their songs. And so how many different birds do I have chirping in the trees today? That's the way, just wandering through your garden, sitting in your garden, hearing it, watching it, seeing it happen. So number one, you got to have clover in your lawn, because clover is a nitrogen fixer. And the reason people don't like clover is strictly keyed to marketing. They used to market clover for grass seed, because clover is a really good companion for turf grasses. And then when they started using the chemicals after the war, 2,4-D and atrazine, that are broadleaf killers, well, it killed the clover. So then Scott said, I guess we shouldn't put clover in our seed mix anymore. That's sort of counter the end product. But what we will do is sell more fertilizer, because we won't have a nitrogen-fixing plant in our seed mix anymore. So let's tell the world that clover's bad. And that's what they did. And now people think that clover is bad. You can seed clover into your lawn, but if you stop using broadleaf killers, it will appear. And it will be happy. And in August, when turf grasses are not happy because they don't like heat, clover does, and clover will fill all those spaces, and it can outcompete crabgrass. And if you mow higher, you're also doing a lot to increase the photosynthetic leaf blades. Your roots are deeper. The whole system works better. And what about reducing your lawn? I'm sure you've been hearing about that. I call it adventures in mowing. So what if you just mow places that make it look like the parts that aren't mowed are intentional? So if you want to have a wild front yard, what if you mow a frame around it and call it art? Or mow around some trees. So suddenly the beauty of the tree trunks are the focus. You don't have to do anything. This is in my side yard. Like there's nothing particular to do. Once a week or even less. We run our little electric mower around there, done, and it's a little garden all by itself. And this is a client's property. This used to be massive amounts of lawn, and every year we've added more stuff. I use this picture because nobody noticed that we took all that lawn away, really. They only needed that much to get from point A to point B. And a lot of it is Matutia, the ostrich fern, which is a bit aggressive, which is kind of nice in certain large areas because it fills in and you're done. And we don't even cut it back because I think the spent leaves look really beautiful. And in the spring, when you have this much of it, you can eat the croziers. Those are the fiddleheads that are edible. And so it's sort of a done thing. So I ask people, think about what parts of your lawn are you actually using? Which are the parts that you haven't walked on? The only person who walks on it is the person who's mowing it. So why can't those areas be little by little returned to Mother Nature? And so this is a yard I just planted the whole front. Nobody ever went in the front yard, so I just planted it with one of those low, slow grow fescues and gets mowed once a year. And this is a client who, they built a house in the middle of nature, but they didn't really like nature, and they didn't really want, but I wanted nature to surround the house, so the whole plant palette was actually just taken from the surrounding woods, but they didn't really want to touch nature, so I said, well, okay, then we'll just build these elevated pathways for you. So everything, they're elevated so that water and small animals and everything can simply pass right on through. So there's always a way, there's always a way you can work with it. Or you can just this is another Abby job, where, she just fills everything with plants that isn't actually being used. And this is a more elaborate flower beds for a client in East Hampton. But so yes, this takes more work, but it still meets the criteria. And oopsie, I can't even tell what that is. But is that the one with, what is that water? What is in that picture? Oh, that's the use of biomass, right? So all of the biomass on a property stays on the property. Do not send anything, any of the organic matter from your property to the dump. Yes, it takes a little bit of creative behavior and thinking to figure out what to do with it all. One of the great things to do is make paths, and paths are terrific. Just like the mowing makes it look intentional, paths do the same. So paths give you a way, paths, driveways, whatever, give you a way of kind of formalizing your intent on a landscape. So thinking of all the different ways, but then how can you make those as gentle as possible? No, we do not put Roundup on this driveway. The tires kill the weeds, that's all. This is my own driveway. Tires kill the weeds. We mow the center strip now and then, but that's kind of it. And also it means that I don't have to have lawn on either side, because I walk on it all the time, and the people are worried about ticks, but the grasses on either side are far enough away. If you're not brushing against the grasses, the ticks can't get you. And this was a more formal-ish modern house that I did. That meadow is actually more diverse than it looks in this photo, but we used a stone wall that matched stone walls that were elsewhere in the project from historically, to make that segue from the areas that were maintained to the areas that were not. Because if you mow up to a grass or a meadow field, you're seeing the bottoms. That transition can be difficult, looking at where you stopped your cut. Sometimes it's random, well, why did you stop there? It could have been here. So you want to make it look not random. And you also, looking at the base of most grasses is generally not their best feature. So it's good to use some kind of a distinguishing thing. This is Doug Tallamy's garden, so you can see how he did the same thing. He used a wall to separate the part where he mows with his native shrub area. And this is back to my garden, the use of biomass. So when I took over my property, one entire part of it I couldn't even see because it was such a tangle of bittersweet and Rosa multiflora. I couldn't get in there. I didn't know what was in there. So every weekend with my loppers, I was out there. It's called window painting. You make one cut low and one cut as high as you can reach, and then you wait about 5 years and it all falls down from the trees it's in. But in this case, most of the trees were dead under there. So I had a lot of trees. So we cut them up and used them for for log walls in the places where ultimately I might want a hedge or something, but now I'm just like not doing hedges. So I just keep rebuilding the log walls as other wood becomes available, and the log walls melt into the ground. And then when I cut the meadow, I realized, why am I cutting the meadow? Because you got to cut a meadow to keep it lean, or else it starts to succeed. And you really should rake it off to keep the soil lean as well, or it starts to change. So, but why am I carrying all this grass over to my compost heap, which is then filled with grass seeds, which you don't really want in the compost? And it's a lot of lugging stuff around. So I thought, haystacks. I'll build a haystack. So now I have haystacks in my meadows. And so the other thing is you're designing for, in addition to yourself, of course, is for habitat. And habitat is food, shelter, and water. So if you can keep those 3 things in mind with whatever you're doing. So most plants, native plants in particular, provide food and shelter because that's where birds nest, that's where they go to get rid of a predator. But if you do want your place to look a little bit more intentional than just leaving all the stuff that fell out of your trees there, this is something they did at the Native Plant Trust in the Garden in the Woods. They had an artist come in and they took the fallen branches and wove them through the woods, which I felt particularly enchanted by. And this is a little pile I made in part of my, and it's filled with little wrens and thrushes, and you can do it anywhere. This is one taken to a really incredible extreme. This is at Great Dixter, and they built this really amazing habitat pile in an incredibly beautiful way. And if anybody not aware of the work that's being done by Fergus Garrett at Great Dixter, go on their website, learn about it. They're one of the best gardens in the world in southern England. And they have proven actually that you don't have to be all native to be incredibly biodiverse. So they have done, they do not use chemicals, and they do plant for diversity, but they also are planting a much broader spectrum because they're historically a Gertrude Jekyll, what was Christopher Lloyd garden in a Lutyens house. So it's a historic arts and crafts garden, but they've managed to move it into the future. I mean, they're leading the way. And so when people say, well, I run a historic garden, I can't do that, I say, let me show you how. There are people who can show you how. And also leaving standing deadwood, like leaving deadwood in trees, the whole idea that you are helping a tree by chopping at it is, guess what? A business model. So, trees have their own methods of healing themselves and handling what happens as they evolve. Part of it is they provide deadwood that provides habitat for a unique species of insects. Those insects are uniquely valuable to certain birds. The birds want them up in the tree. The insects live up there. They're safe. They're all safe up there. And as soon as you come in and start whacking all that stuff out and sending it to the dump, you have reduced an important resource. By removing deadwood, that's the birds that live in your little houses, very nice, but they are cavity nesters. That's what a birdhouse is. It's a cavity. Cavity nesters historically lived in cavities in dead trees. Why not leave the dead tree? If you're worried about branches, just cut them off and leave the post. I call them like totems. Obviously, it's not by your house or by your car or something. But I let them go, and then when they start getting wobbly, then I can push it over in the direction I'd like it to fall. But watching the trees as they evolve, the various different kinds of life that move through, the insects, the animals, the birds, what's nesting in there, what's banging on it, it's fascinating. And yes, water. So you can do anything from a tiny bit of water. This is a little goldfinch that would come to I put this bird bath right next to my hose bib, so I would be sure to fill it every day. And this little bird would always come just when the light was at a certain way, which I thought was rather well planned because the gold showed, he just glowed. And so this year I built a pond. So I've stepped it up. I did it without plastic. That was my goal. It's all done with bentonite. Messy, a messy project, but nevertheless, it's holding water, and the great thing about using clay is it's self-healing. So you can plant water plants all around, and the roots will go right through it. They're not a problem. And this is like, I put it in I think May, and this would have been July. So you can see how quickly, of course, I don't have to water it. And also bees need water, but bees have really short legs and they don't swim. So you need to make sure that bees have a source of fresh water that is kind of like the edge of a puddle, because hardly anybody has puddles anymore. There are no puddles around. There's no little streams or small ponds. Those have all been wiped out by our modern neighborhoods. And so bees need a reliable source. There might be a puddle for an afternoon, but they need reliable sources of fresh water that they can access on their short little legs. So I call them my bee beaches. And so what are we doing? So what about you? So all of this wildness, can you live with that? But it doesn't mean you're giving up on the beauty. There are so many fabulous native plants, and there's so many great ways to combine them. It's really no different. I mean, so if if your beds are square, that's fine. The pollinators and the birds don't care what shape the beds are. What they care about is what's in them, that you have as much of the year as possible, at least 3 things in bloom. And so this is my brand new garden that I installed after I put up my deer fence. And so this is it, right, after just about 3-4 months. And then this is it in the fall with the sun behind it. I do not cut anything back until as late as possible in the spring. There's a lot of insects in there. There are a lot of birds that are counting on the seeds and the cover. And it's so much prettier to me. It's so much more beautiful than if it was just chopped down and looking like little shorn lumps. This is one by P. Rudolph, the master. So just to show you what, when you get a great design and an incredible photographer, that's what it can look like. And so, but people will say, well, I can't do that. This is way overwhelming. I don't know all these plants. I don't know how to do it. So what I started, I call it Copy That, which is you go out into your neighborhood somewhere where there's like a preserve or someplace natural that isn't terribly altered by invasives or non-natives, and take a picture of it. So this is on Shelter Island near my house. And I thought, that's like, what designer couldn't love that arrangement? It's complete, it's art. And so take a picture of it and copy it. Now you might not have because this is a very sandy soil, very baking sun, and it's self-regulating. This did this all by itself. You can do it too. You don't have to do anything. This is a little pond at a local nature preserve with an incredible Ilex verticillata and some panicum. And then, so when I did a client's house, they wanted me to put a swimming pool in their lawn. And I said, no, we're going to put it in the meadow, because those are the inspirations. Let's put the swimming pool in that field that you've got next to your house, and just build a big enough deck around that it's not like falling in the water. And it's just buzzing with life, and they love it. And then this is another place where I like to walk, and then I bring that home to my meadow to look as similar as possible. And since it's existing in nature on its own, if I can match the soil conditions and the light and the slope to what I've seen and like, it should do the same for me. And this is my meadow. This is the meadow where the deer are. So it's not got a lot of flowers, but it's really still, so the beauty is more subtle, but this is it heading into the fall. And this is in like high fall with Nyssa sylvaticus, the pepperidge tree. Nyssas have more common names than probably any other tree out there, so I don't know what you call it here, but up on Martha's Vineyard it's called beetlebong, and but it's a wonderful tree. And since I'm on the wetlands, it is happy there because it likes wet feet, but it's fine in any garden soil, and it's really great. And don't forget the sky. The sky is a really important part of your design. It's subliminal, light and shadow. If you design a garden that takes you from light to shadow, back to light again, people will follow that. It's incredibly alluring. So the big thing is to like let go, have fun with it, because why have something out there that's stressing you? I mean, like the climate crisis is stressful enough. So if you can feel really terrific, not only about what you're doing in your garden, but also about what you're not doing. And like, so what? You have a couple of dandelions, really? They are only bad because you've been told they are. And so what if Queen Anne's lace moves into your native planting? It's fine, you know. There are so many plants that have naturalized. I am not a fanatic, and I really don't think that's what's going to get us through this at all. And so even like garlic chives, they're pretty aggressive, but boy, they fill a niche very nicely. The bees love them because a lot of our pollinators are not native either. So it's fine. Just let it happen. This is mullein, also not native, but it pops up all over my garden and it's beautiful. And so I used to try to work so hard to keep this patch of gravel like this. It's modernist. So this is just gravel and that's just grass. And then mullein started appearing and I thought, wait, oh, this is really beautiful. Just let it be. And so one day in my bark chip walk, I was walking out the walk and I saw something up ahead and I said, looks like a piece of garbage got left. You know, what is that piece of package or plastic? It was a stinking horn. And I mean, just like the craziest mushroom that just arrived. And so these are the things that are happening now. Last year, a morel popped up in one of my, by an old oak stump. I mean, when you let it happen, it happens. So thank you. So take us away, come with us on this amazing journey and do what you can to help us all ensure the future we, and especially our children and grandchildren, deserve. So we put out a monthly newsletter. We are constantly available if you need help. Just write to us. We have a lot of resources on both the Perfect Earth and the 2/3 for the Birds websites, but you can reach them both through that QR code if you wish, or you can go to the website as we always used to do, but now we're very modern. So that is, I'm open for questions. So if anybody has a question, please do ask.